Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Courage to Become podcast. This is the podcast where we dare you to leave the shit show of perfection behind and embrace your true, imperfect self. I'm Joe, I'm a quantum human design specialist, and I'm here with you because just a few short years ago, I was extremely unhappy in every area of my life, and I felt more alone than I ever thought possible. I had no idea what my purpose was, who I really was, and I was really struggling with who am I? What is my purpose? Am I doing things right? Am I doing things wrong? Who am I supposed to be? All of these questions. I felt grief, I felt anger, I felt fear, I felt guilt, I felt shame, I felt desire. Literally every low vibrational frequency on the Hawkins scale of vibrational frequency, which is the scale of consciousness, I felt the low vibrational frequency of every one of those, which meant that I was really feeling not good about myself. I was stuck. I had just gone through a really horrible year in my life. I lost both of my parents. My son, my oldest, moved away to college. I I had been working at the same job for 21 years, and corporate life was not, it was looking like I needed to make a change. I was no longer happy in my job. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. It was just crazy. And then my marriage was falling apart through no fault but my own. All of these things in 2020 really, and there's so much more to it. I'm only giving you surface level because there's more to it and it goes so much deeper than that. But I was really feeling stuck and I didn't know who I was or what I wanted, and I had no idea how to figure out who I was or what I wanted. I had spent my entire life taking care of everyone around me. I forgot about me and I forgot who I was and I forgot the things that I used to like. I didn't even remember what they were anymore. And so I knew I needed to do something. And so I tried a few different things. I did a couple of different types of counseling. I tried drinking. I even went back to smoking for a hot minute. And the only thing that I found that helped to support me and to help me to answer the questions that I was asking was human design. And so I found this by listening to positive podcasts, and that is one of the reasons why I decided to create a podcast because I know that they helped me, and the podcasts are what introduced me to human design. But I know that it helped me to listen to positive podcasts and to start to really understand what was going on within me and where I had gone all this time and what was happening. And I was finally starting to feel like there was a way to help bring me back to myself, to help me to figure out who I was. And for those of you that don't know what human design is a map. It's like a blueprint of your energy. Each of us has our own energetic design, and that energetic design tells us what lessons we're here to learn. And even within our human design chart, you'll see there are a lot of colors. There's a lot of red and a lot of black and a lot of white, and then there's different colored shapes in there. And not even if it's not colored in our chart, that means we're undefined, but that does not mean that we don't experience that. So human design teaches us to all of life's lessons, and especially when we do it with other people, we learn so much more about how that energy can present when we do it in group sessions, because then you can see how other people take that, and you can also get their opinions when you feel a certain way, get other people's opinions that have different definition or different energy running through their chart. So human design is basically a map of the lessons that you're here to learn. So it's pretty cool. There's a lot of information in it. Um, but when I found human design, this is when I started to realize that I didn't know what it was like to put myself first because I had never done that before. I had never put myself first because as a child, I wasn't put first with good reason, and I will go into that. Um, but what I realized was that I'm actually afraid to put myself first because I'm afraid of what that's going to feel like. And I'm afraid that what that would mean is that everyone would know that I'm not that perfect girl that everyone always expected me to be. And let me give you a little bit of history about me and how I was able to unravel all of this. I'll give you a little bit of my backstory. So, I grew up with an older brother who was developmentally delayed, and there was a physical component where due to his disease, he became extremely overweight and behaviorally unbalanced. And so that meant that the focus was always on Chris. And so I had to be a good little girl and not rock the boat because the adults had their hands full with my brother. And so I had a good reputation of being a good girl behaviorally, but I didn't feel like I was that perfect girl because one of my so-called flaws, or what I've always thought was a flaw in me, was that I was too sensitive. And so from the time I was a baby, my dad nicknamed me Wine Ass. And for the rest of his life, even as an adult, when I was an adult, he would tell everyone about how all I did was cry. And that started as a baby, obviously, but it went all the way into adulthood because that's just who I am. I'm just sensitive. And so, considering the story that we tell ourselves comes from our beliefs and creates our identity, right? So, the story that I'm telling about myself came from my beliefs and created my identity. My identity, in part, the story that I was telling myself based on what I believed, because it was ingrained in me since the day I was born, was that I wasn't lovable and I wasn't worthy because I couldn't be perfect, because I was too sensitive. And every day I got reminded about how I was too sensitive, how there was something wrong with me, right? And I know that that sounds ridiculous, but as adults, we have logic and reasoning skills, right? So we understand that he was just playing. It doesn't mean that there was not anything wrong with me, that I wasn't perfect or I wasn't a good little girl or that I wasn't worthy and I wasn't lovable. But as a child who doesn't have any of those logic or reasoning skills, this is exactly what that looks like. It looks to them like they're not good enough. And even as adults, when we talk about or when we think about the things that we've said to our children, like when I first started realizing what was happening or what had happened, it made me think back to the things that I've said to my children, even if it was just joking and not realizing it. And so we have to remember that kids don't have those logic and reasoning skills, and they're going to form their beliefs as children when this is all happening. So let me give you a little bit more about me. So when I was 3 years old, my parents got divorced. And They typically say we don't remember anything from the time we're 3 or under. But our subconscious mind remembers everything. And this is when we're like sponges and we take everything in and we learn from everything, right? So the last memory or the only memory that I have of my dad living at home was he had gotten in a car accident down the street and he was in the bathroom and he was wiping blood from his forehead. And as I walked up to go into the bathroom to see him, he shut the door in my face and pushed it closed on me. And I know as an adult, thinking back on this, that this was because he didn't want me to see him like that. But as a child, this looked like he couldn't be bothered with me. I wasn't important at that time. And in my 3-year-old mind, because remember, this is the last memory I have of him living at home, he left the house after that. So in my 3-year-old mind, he left because of me, because I wasn't perfect. And as harsh as that sounds, and as crazy as it sounds as an adult, when you think about how a child doesn't have logic or reasoning skills, this makes sense. Like, this is what causes them to feel. And we're all here because we're striving to feel a certain way. And we've all learned to put up blocks to prevent feeling any kind of pain. So, as a young child, as these little things happen to us that aren't even happening the way that we see them as a child, and they're shaping who we are, and we don't even realize it. So we have to be really, really careful because there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt in children who feel like they're not perfect. And I know this because I felt it for years. And that's only one small symptom of what happens when we're children. Maybe your wound isn't that you're not perfect. I have many, many wounds. That's just one of them. Um, but what happens is as soon as we put that wall up to protect ourselves, and we all do it, and we do it as children, even subconsciously, you avoid any kind of situation that could hurt you again or cause you to feel that pain. And as we do this, it causes us to actually attract that same energy into us because those blocks make it look like we want more of that. Our brain doesn't know the difference between what we want and what's real. So it thinks that when you put that wall up, when you think about, I don't ever want to do that again, and this all happens energetically, it actually calls that back in. And that's why a lot of times you'll see these things that hurt you happen over and over and over again. And it might happen in a different way, but you're going to feel the same kind of pain and you're going to feel that same wound get triggered. And that's because your brain thinks you want more of that because you're holding on to that energy. And so that repeats in your life. And the only way to prevent that from repeating is to let go of that wall that you put up that you think is protecting you because it's really not. And so my point to creating this podcast was one, to help people because I know that it really helped me, but it's really kind of to prove to myself and to you that perfection is a shit show. There is no such thing as perfection because perfection is literally in the eye of the beholder, and every one of us beholders sees things from a little bit of a different perspective because we're all different. We all have different energies. We've all been raised with different people in different cultures, in different societies. We all have different lessons to learn. So we're all going to see things differently. So there is no such thing as perfect. Perfect to you is what you think of as perfect in your eyes, but that's not necessarily perfect because, as I told you, as children, we have these beliefs that we create that aren't true or aren't real that we're holding on to. And so we have to settle on being perfectly imperfect because those beliefs were actually happening in our lives to help us to grow. So the lessons and the energy that we're born with is the energetic map that we need to learn what we need to learn in order to meet our purpose, in order to meet our potential. We all have so much more potential than we tap into. Like we only tap into a minute amount of the potential that we have because we're not raised to understand that we have, it's all energy and we have so much more power than we allow ourselves to explore. And we limit ourselves by holding on to these beliefs that don't mean anything. And so we have to look at, what does perfection look like in your eyes? Does it mean every I dotted and every T crossed and all hair and makeup in place, makeup exactly as you want it, ideal weight on the scale? What does that mean for you? And what would it be like if you were to miss a dot or to cross an L instead of a T or to shed a tear and have evident smears of makeup all over your face? What if it were okay if you weren't quite where you felt comfortable on the scale? What if you gave yourself permission to be perfectly imperfect? Just imagine that for a minute. What would that feel like? Like we're all here because we want to feel something, right? What would that feel like to you? And imagine just being able to just be you and not having to worry about pretending to be somebody you're not to impress other people. Just think just for a minute, what would your life look like if you had absolutely everything you wanted? And I'm not necessarily talking about things. I'm talking about feelings. Focus on what would that feel like? That's the beginning of manifestation. And we're going to talk a lot about that on this podcast too. Manifestation isn't just about envisioning it in your mind and poof, it happens. It's about believing in it. It's about feeling in it. It's about taking steps towards it. And we're going to show you how to do all of that in our episodes here on the Courage to Become podcast. So, my goal is to invite you to embrace your authenticity, flaws, mistakes, and all, because these unique qualities are what really make you uniquely special. It's time to let go of the idea of perfection and simply just be you. By tuning into this weekly podcast, you're going to discover how your unique energetic design influences the way that you feel and the thoughts that you think. And it's going to help you to reveal the hidden patterns within your own unique energetic DNA. Together, we're going to explore how these elements are intricately designed to guide you through life's lessons and challenges. Through human design, you're going to learn how aligning with your natural energy frequency helps you to reconnect with your core soul essence and empowers you to navigate life with more authenticity and with greater self-awareness. If we're not aware, we can't catch when these things are happening. So one of the things we're going to learn on this journey is being aware. When we maintain our core soul frequency, that's when we feel in alignment. That's when we feel happy, motivated, creative, ready to take on the world. And that is most likely, I know it's the feeling I'm chasing. It's most likely the feeling that you're chasing too. We all just want to feel good. So if that's you, I invite you to continue to tune in. And I would also be so grateful if you would please sprinkle some love on the like button and share this podcast with any of your friends that you think might also relate. Thank you for joining me on The Courage to Become, where we talk about real life situations, energetic explanations, and anything that will help us to continue to feel better about being free to be authentically aligned with our core soul frequency. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. I encourage you to post your questions in the comments, and that gives me ideas on future content as well. So if there's something that you'd like to learn more about, put it in the comments and I can create more content on it. So thank you for joining me for this first episode. And please remember to sprinkle some love on that like button. And thanks again for joining.